October 14th, 1897. A journal recovered 11 days after death. The final entry was written at 4:30 in the afternoon. Weather clear, 38 degrees, barometer steady. The traveler recorded his shelter, an 8 by 10-foot lean-to, spruce poles lashed with rawhide, 6 inches of pine boughs for bedding, 3 days of firewood split and stacked, approximately a quarter cord, 7 to 9 pounds of dried meat and flour remaining. Tools inventoried. Route planned. There was no fear in those words. No urgency. No sense that anything was wrong. The journal ends during competence, not crisis. But death came 3 to 5 days later. No blizzard. No dramatic storm. Just a temperature drop of 15 to 20 degrees overnight. When they found him, his boots were placed neatly beside the shelter. The firewood he'd stacked sat untouched. There was no sign of struggle, no attempt to travel, no panic. The man had done everything right by every frontier standard of his time. He chose dry ground, oriented his shelter away from the wind, maintained his equipment, avoided overexertion, and yet he died in conditions that shouldn't have killed him, because the failure wasn't in his preparation. It was in which tradition he trusted.
He followed institutional frontier practice, lightweight shelters, ventilation over insulation, fire as the primary heat source. But older knowledge, the kind passed down by indigenous guides and immigrant settlers, warned of something different. Never camp at basin bottoms after first frost. Always seal the windward wall. Always insulate below before building above. Cold air pools in valleys, temperatures can drop 20 to 30 degrees lower than the ridgelines above. Under clear skies, radiative heat loss accelerates. A lean-to bleeds heat at 2 to 3 times the rate of an enclosed, earth-banked shelter. And once hypothermia begins during rest, cognitive decline occurs within 30 to 60 minutes, often without panic, without terror, without any final words written in a journal. The wilderness doesn't kill people when they panic. It kills them when they believe the danger has already passed. If you want to see how one man's final, confident entry became evidence of a mistake that would change survival practices for generations, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell, because this story doesn't end with his death. It ends with what his journal proved. The recovery team found the journal on October 25, 1897, wrapped in oilcloth and placed with deliberate care inside a canvas pack. The pack itself lay beside the body, undisturbed by weather or scavengers, as if the man had simply set it down before lying back to rest. The lead investigator, a forest warden named Harlow, noted the precision of it, the ties secured in proper hitches, the flap folded twice to seal the opening. This was not the work of someone in distress. The journal's final entry bore the date October 14. 4:30 in the afternoon. The handwriting remained steady across every line, the letters formed with the same deliberate slant that marked earlier passages. Weather clear, the entry read. 38 degrees by pocket thermometer. Barometer holding steady at 29.8 inches. Wind negligible, from the northwest. No precipitation expected. Beneath the meteorological data came an inventory. The traveler had checked his equipment with the thoroughness of a quartermaster, hatchet sharpened, saw teeth set, matches sealed in tin, 43 rounds of ammunition remaining. His shelter measured 8 feet by 10, constructed from spruce poles stripped of bark and lashed with rawhide thong at intervals of 18 inches. He'd laid 6 inches of fresh pine boughs over bare ground for bedding, oriented the opening southeast to catch morning sun, and positioned the structure against a granite outcrop that would serve as a windbreak and heat reflector. The firewood notation occupied half a page. Approximately 1/4 cord split and stacked, he'd written. Predominantly lodgepole pine, some Douglas fir. Season dry, estimated moisture content below 20%. Fire lay prepared with tinder, kindling graded by diameter, fuel pieces sorted by burn duration. 3 days supply by conservative estimate. Food stores, 7 to 9 pounds of dried venison and elk, 4 pounds of flour, salt, rendered fat, dried apples. Water source located 200 yards north-northeast, flow reliable, potable without treatment. Route planned for October 16, weather permitting. Elevation gain of 800 feet over 3 miles to ridge traverse. Expected travel time 4 to 5 hours with current pack weight of 32 pounds. The entry ended there. No signature. No closing sentiment. Just an abrupt stop mid-task, as if he'd set down the pencil intending to return within the hour. The coroner's report placed time of death between October 17 and October 19, 3 to 5 days after the final journal entry. The county medical examiner, a physician named Graves who'd served in the Army Medical Corps during the Indian Wars, noted the absence of trauma, disease indicators, or signs of starvation. The body showed no defensive wounds, no broken bones, no evidence of animal predation prior to death. Tissue examination revealed well-nourished muscle, healthy organ development, no pathological abnormalities. The man had been in excellent physical condition when he died. Weather records from the nearest station, 42 miles southeast at lower elevation, showed no blizzard, no ice storm, no dramatic meteorological event during the relevant window. Temperatures had dropped 15 to 20 degrees overnight on October 15, then stabilized. Skies remained clear through October 20. Barometric pressure held steady. Wind speeds averaged 8 to 12 miles per hour from the northwest, well within normal parameters for the season. The forest warden Harlow reconstructed the scene with methodical attention. The boots had been removed and placed side by side 18 inches from the shelter opening, laces still tied, positioned as if the man intended to step back into them. The fire lay remained untouched, tinder bundle intact, kindling arranged in precise gradations, larger fuel pieces stacked within arm's reach. Not a single match had been struck. The entire quarter cord of split wood sat exactly as described in the journal, seasoned and dry and utterly useless. Inside the lean-to, the pine bough bedding showed compression patterns consistent with a body at rest. The blanket roll had been unwrapped and spread flat. The traveler's rifle leaned against the granite outcrop, loaded with a round in the chamber, safety engaged. His pack sat upright, contents organized and accessible. Everything suggested a man settling in for routine sleep, not emergency shelter. Local guides examined the site and identified the problem immediately. The camp occupied the lowest point of a subalpine basin, a natural cold sink where frigid air accumulated after sunset. The lean-to design, while standard frontier practice, offered an R-value of approximately 1 to 2, barely more insulation than canvas. The structure bled heat at 2 to 3 times the rate of an enclosed shelter. Ground conduction alone would have drawn 40% of body heat directly into frozen earth. Under clear skies, radiative losses accelerated throughout the night. The investigation refused the easy conclusion of incompetence. Every decision the traveler made aligned with published frontier guidance of the period. He'd chosen elevated ground within the basin, avoiding the marshy depression where standing water would freeze. The granite outcrop behind his shelter provided wind protection and a natural heat reflector for campfires. His southeast-facing orientation captured maximum daylight and minimized exposure to prevailing northwest winds. The site offered proximity to water, defensible sight lines, and dry soil composition that wouldn't wick moisture into bedding. His equipment met or exceeded standard recommendations. The hatchet showed proper maintenance, edge sharp enough to shave wood fibers, handle secure in its eye, no cracks in the hickory. The saw had been recently set, teeth alternating at precise angles for efficient crosscutting. His matches remained sealed in a watertight tin with striker surface intact. The rifle bore no rust, no fouling in the barrel, no defects in the action. Food stores had been protected from moisture and rodents. Water purification wasn't necessary at that elevation and season, and he'd correctly identified a clear upstream source. The shelter construction demonstrated competent backcountry craft. Spruce poles averaged 4 inches in diameter, providing structural integrity without excessive weight. Rawhide lashings were spaced at 18-inch intervals, tight enough to prevent racking in wind. The lean-to angle shed rain efficiently while maximizing interior volume. Pine boughs had been laid butt end down in overlapping courses, creating a springy mattress that elevated the body several inches above frozen ground. By the standards taught in military field manuals and civilian survival guides of the 1890s, the traveler had executed a textbook backcountry camp. But the failure existed not in what he did, it existed in which tradition informed those actions. Institutional frontier practice emphasized mobility over thermal mass. Lightweight shelters allowed rapid relocation. Ventilation prevented carbon monoxide accumulation from open fires. These principles served mounted cavalry, survey parties, and commercial trappers who moved frequently and carried minimal loads. They did not serve stationary winter camps in cold sinks. Older knowledge, transmitted through indigenous guides and European immigrant settlers from alpine regions, warned against basin camping after first frost. Cold air is heavier than warm air and flows downhill like water, pooling in depressions where temperature inversions can create microclimates 20 to 30 degrees colder than ridgelines 200 feet higher. The traveler's thermometer read 38 degrees at 4:30 in the afternoon. By midnight, ambient temperature at his location likely dropped to 12 to 15 degrees. With downslope katabatic winds averaging 10 to 12 miles per hour, wind chill equivalency reached -5 degrees. The mechanics of his death left no dramatic evidence because hypothermia kills through quiet systemic failure. There was no chase, no predator, no avalanche or rockfall or sudden storm. Just the steady theft of core temperature while the body rested, mistaking cold for fatigue, shutdown for sleep. Medical literature from alpine regions documented the progression with clinical precision. Core temperature below 95 degrees Fahrenheit triggers mild hypothermia, shivering, confusion, loss of fine motor control. The traveler likely noticed nothing alarming at this stage. Shivering is normal in cold weather. Fumbling with bootlaces happens when fingers go numb. These symptoms feel manageable, temporary, easily dismissed as discomfort rather than danger. Below 90 degrees, moderate hypothermia sets in. Shivering stops as the body conserves energy for vital organs. Cognitive function deteriorates rapidly, decision-making becomes impaired, memory fails, speech slurs. Victims often experience paradoxical undressing, removing clothing because confused thermal regulation makes them feel hot. But the traveler's body showed no signs of this. His clothing remained properly fastened, layers intact. He never reached the stage of delirium that might have driven him from shelter. Below 86 degrees, severe hypothermia produces unconsciousness. The heart rate drops below 40 beats per minute. Respiration becomes shallow and irregular. Brain activity slows to minimal function. Death follows within hours unless core temperature is actively restored through external warming, something impossible in a remote basin without fire, without help, without the cognitive capacity to recognize the emergency. The unused firewood became evidence of the point of no return. Lighting a fire requires fine motor coordination, striking matches, arranging tinder, feeding kindling at precise intervals. These skills degrade within 30 to 60 minutes of hypothermia onset. The traveler likely intended to build his fire after settling into camp, after removing his boots, after spreading his bedding. But by the time he lay down to rest, his core temperature had already dropped enough to impair judgment. Cold didn't feel dangerous. It felt like tiredness. Sleep seemed reasonable, restorative, the logical choice before beginning evening tasks. Parallel cases existed in mountaineering archives and Arctic expedition records. Journals ending days before deaths, final entries calm and methodical, no indication the writer sensed approaching crisis. Maritime logs stopping mid-passage before ships foundered. Prospector diaries ceasing during fair weather in well-supplied camps. The pattern repeated across continents and decades, competent individuals dying in survivable conditions because the danger operated below the threshold of conscious recognition. The indigenous guides who examined the site pointed to the mistake with immediate certainty. They showed forest wardens how cold air drains into basins like water filling a bowl, how clear skies accelerate heat loss through radiation, how wind channels down slopes and strips warmth from inadequate shelters. The solution wasn't complex: camp 200 to 400 feet higher on ridge shoulders where thermal layering keeps temperature stable, build enclosed structures with sealed windward walls, insulate below the body before insulating above, and stockpile fuel at double the estimated requirement because consumption increases exponentially as ambient temperature drops. Within a decade, backcountry practices shifted throughout the mountain territories. Survey manuals revised their shelter specifications. The Forest Service issued updated guidelines for winter patrol stations. Commercial outfitters redesigned their seasonal camps. The changes were quantifiable and immediate. Winter survival rates in comparable elevations improved by 30 to 40% over the following 15 years. Shelters incorporating earth banking, sod walls, or snow chinking maintained interior temperatures 25 to 35 degrees above ambient overnight. Fuel consumption dropped by 50 to 60% when structures retained heat through insulation rather than constant fire feeding. The Traveler's Journal became a teaching document, preserved in forestry archives and referenced in training courses. But it was used selectively. Officials emphasized the weather data, the temperature drop, the inherent dangers of wilderness isolation. They framed his death as inevitable, an unfortunate victim of natural forces beyond human control. The institutional failure, the reliance on doctrine that ignored localized knowledge, the dismissal of indigenous and immigrant expertise, these elements disappeared from official accounts. The journal itself ended mid-confidence, mid-preparation, in the calm between arrival and crisis. The final page showed no smudging, no water damage, no signs of being written in haste. The pencil line remained steady to the last word. He'd wrapped it carefully before lying down, preserving the record for whoever might follow, never knowing the record would end days before his death, never sensing that the danger wasn't coming, it was already there, patient and invisible, waiting for him to stop moving and rest. The wilderness doesn't announce itself with storms or predators or dramatic final moments. It kills in silence, through methods that feel like nothing more than cold and tiredness, leaving bodies that show no struggle and journals that stop mid-sentence, mid-task, mid-belief that everything was under control.